What was Rav Chaim Volozhin's attitudes towards the Hasidic movement, to the Hasidic leaders, and how or why did that differ from the attitude of his teacher, the Vilna Gaon?
Okay, that's it's a complicated question story, but I will try to make it as simple as possible. I've written quite a bit on these issues. During the Vilna Gaon's time, there was real animosity between the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim. A lot of literature has been written about this, specifically by historians. I wrote an article on this, which is still pending publication. I think I wrote it 8 years ago. So that happens sometimes. But the animosity was by many reasons. I always say, following Chaim Hillel ben Sasson, the historian, that there was a difference between how the leaders in Lithuanian Jewry saw the problem and how the Vilna Gaon saw the problem. For the leadership, it was a political problem. Remember, the Hasidic movement started their own Bate Knesset, their own synagogues. They had their own Shchita. They had their own Sidur, the Sachari, which was actually, in the city abroad, there was Beit Knesset. There was a shul who davened Nisachari, but these were specifically Kabbalists, not regular run-of-the-mill people. And it's interesting that in the first cherem, or excommunication against the Hasidim in 1772, so in the city abroad, the main thing they mention is the fact that how dare they daven Nusach Sfard. This is only for the elite who study Kabbalah. It's not supposed to be for everybody, but that's their main argument in the city of Rome. In general, it seems that the first cherem was not taken as seriously as the second one. The second one, around 1781, that's the one where most of the communities in Lithuania signed on the dotted line. 1772, there was less feeling that it was necessary, but the Gra signed both times. The Gra's problem with the Hasidim was less political, in my opinion, but it was more ideological. But I'd like to talk more about Rav Chaim Volozhin. But about the Gra, what we know in his letter that he wrote towards the end of his life against the Hasidim, certain issues like their issue of teaching everybody that God is everywhere and in everything, that both Rav Chaim and the Gra, and Rav Chaim spells it out in his Nefesh HaChaim, he says this is not proper to teach ordinary people such things, because it's very confusing when you say God is in everything. I mean, if God is in everything, then why can't I study Torah in the washroom? God's in everything, no? Why can't I daven to this table? Why does it have to be in a Beit Knesset towards Yerushalayim? God is everywhere and everything. So it could be very confusing for somebody who doesn't understand the fine details of Kabbalistic ideas. So sometimes ideas like this can bring people to pantheism and things like that. And Rav Chaim and the Gra also was not so happy about this idea. Teach everybody that God is everywhere and everything. And there's a reason it's in the Zohar and not in the Talmud. Other things that they had a problem with Hasidim was, I would say, the relationship to the study of Torah. But again, different Hasidic groups saw things differently. Like in Chabad, the study of Torah is very central. Remember, Chabad are Litvak Hasidim. They're in Belarus, which is exactly where Rav Chaim Volozhin was. Bar-Ilan were also Litvak Hasidim. But other Hasidic groups in, let's say, in other parts of Poland, you can see sometimes when you read the Mekorot, that even in the Magid, that he says that sometimes you should take a break from studying Torah because Torah Lishma is thinking about godliness, etc. Whereas Rav Chaim says you don't take a break from Limud Torah. That is Torah Lishma. That is your connection to God. You don't need the break. So there are a lot of things of differences between. But I have to say that the feelings of enmity, the fights, had stopped during the time of Chaim Volozhin. Chaim Volozhin even welcomed Hasidic students in his yeshiva, but the ideological issues persisted. And we can find them in basically every shar, every gate of Nefesh HaChaim, there is some issue which he brings up with the Hasidim from an ideological point of view, but he was very tolerant in a day-to-day point of view.
And these students who were Hasidim were given the freedom, were allowed to practice their Hasidut as they saw fit in Yeshiva Volozhin?
I'm not sure exactly what it means to practice their Hasidut. When the yeshiva, they daven with everybody at the yeshiva. Whether they privately did Nusach Sfard was up to them, but the yeshiva daven Nusach Ashkenaz.
Okay.
I wasn't, when I came to Israel, the yeshivot I came to were Nusach Sfard. I privately davened Nusach Ashkenaz, but the yeshiva was Nusach Sfard. I mean, that's not unusual. And about tefillin on Chol HaMoed, well, the girl also said not to put on tefillin on Chol HaMoed. So he says that's the way he understood the sugya in the Talmud, not necessarily according to the Zohar. So, I mean, that was not an issue either. Did they wear the gartel? I don't know. But I assume if they did, I don't think, again, Rav Chaim was very tolerant. The students knew, though, that he was opposed. So I assume that they were, relatively quiet about it. Of course, Rav Chaim had a grandson who became a Kohen of Chassid and married a woman from Kohen of Chassidim. And we have in the Shiltot literature an interesting part there where it says, when the student says, Amar Rabbeinu, our rabbi, meaning Reb Chaim, said to a family member that he had who inclined to the Hasidim of today, because remember, Hasidut, we've had Hasidut in our history in other different forms too. So he said three things. I want you to keep three things. Number one, study the Gemara and its pilpul, which means its intricacies. And that should be the main worship before the Holy One, blessed be He. Secondly, keep all the laws of the Talmud. And three, don't talk about the Gra. But the first two also sees a little bit how he saw Hasidut, that he was afraid that they didn't spend enough time in the study of Talmud. And he was also afraid that maybe they were a little bit lax in the keeping of mitzvot. Remember, he blames them for not davening at the right times, which we know for sure was a problem in early Hasidism. Of course, even today, if you need a minyan on Shabbat at 11 o'clock in the morning, you go to Meir Sharim and you'll find one, or Bnei Brak. It's not a problem among the Hasidim.